police are the real criminals here. Thank you. Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from Vale-Smith. Are you sick of being unlucky? Okay then, Vale-Smith, obscure Bandcamp artist and fellow YouTube music reviewer Buffalo staple. This is now my third time covering a project of his on this channel. I covered his debut album, All for a Cascade, in 2018. It was okay. I then covered his sophomore album, Origami, last year, and that was much better, and even turned out to be one of my favorite albums of the year. He may not have been around all that long or have a particularly wide audience outside of this particular circle of YouTube music critics, but he's definitely formed a unique style for himself that I could recognize from a distance, making some low-key, restrained, and sparse, but still banging, wonky, trap, future-based productions with pretty solidly fleshed-out sound design. Not usually the kind of genres I'd typically be into, but honestly his stuff has helped me soften on these genres a lot more than I would have otherwise. Now, nearly all his stuff does sound pretty similar, so I kinda went into this already with a pretty good idea on what it was gonna sound like. And I had a feeling I was going to like it either way, I just didn't know how much it was actually going to give me in terms of discussion material. And you know, I've now sat with it a good week or so, letting it soak in, figuring out how I feel on it, and in some ways I think Are You Sick of Being Unlucky is in fact an improvement on his last album. And in other ways, it's not. On one hand, the sound design is a step up. The mixes are less sparse, and these melodies feel like they take up much more sonic space. I could officially now mistake Vale-Smith for a proper professional producer with a budget at this point. Not to mention, I think the pacing is much better than Origami as well. Origami took a while to really get going and kind of finished in a less than climactic way. And this album definitely does not have that issue. It already had me totally hooked with its opening 5 seconds. And this project ends much more satisfyingly as well. Also, it might somehow be even more seamless than Origami. These tracks all physically feel like they're building into each other, and there's not a single transition that feels jarring or doesn't feel like a direct and smooth segue. On the other hand, this project also isn't as tight as Origami. It does have a few moments here and there that I didn't think were that interesting or added much that other tracks couldn't already. Not to mention, I think Vale-Smith wears some particular influences on his sleeve more than he did before. I mean, he has always felt pretty directly inspired by artists like Rusty and Sam Gallatry, but there were moments on this project that directly called those artist styles to mind, more so the former. Quite a few very Glass Swords-inspired moments on here. And I don't just say that because I only listened to those artists for the first time after Origami had been selected as one of my favorite albums of 2019. Even after hearing said influences, I don't think that project directly calls them to mind in the same way this one does. This one just feels a little more obviously derivative. But even so, he's still far from a ripoff of Rusty, even here. There may be quite a few similar synth textures and sound blends, but Vale-Smith definitely has a less commercial and more subtle approach to his compositions than that guy does. It's definitely not to the point where I could outright mistake one for the other. But, okay, yeah, may as well discuss individual tracks. This project's first 6 tracks don't have a single miss. I think he might even come out the gate with the best track in the bunch. The glassy and expansive synths on Turmoil Majula are super attention-grabbing and immediately pull you in right from the first half a second you start hearing them. Doesn't waste a single second of your time, and it directly transitions into the various shifting, almost synthwave-y melodic passages of Advancement, and the beautiful but still rather experimental Kora tune, which lives up to its title using the sounds of, Kora music and chopped up African singing, one of the most texturally evocative moments on here. And we switch over into Red Urchin Tempest so seamlessly you might not even notice, just as dramatic in detail as before, with lots of gorgeous melodic pads flying around all over the place, while the usual trap percussion just slams down on it, getting pretty blank Banshee-ish around here. Cassia Topaz is probably the one track on here where I always notice the transition into, though that's because it has the most openly memorable sample and hook in the bunch. No, I want ya, no, I need ya in my life. Totally sticks out, but in a good way. And the same mix and atmosphere is carried over into Hazel Clip, which has some organ tones that have a little bit of a 60s-y tinge to them that are pretty nice, and some awesome progressions of bells and pads in its second half. This entire stretch of the first 6 tracks have been great. Lots of thick, gorgeous, and detailed mix that make full use of the entire sound spectrum. After this, though, it gets maybe a little spottier. Panorama was cool when I first heard it, thanks to the samples of Vale-Smith himself talking to some friend of his in that less than intelligible way. I mean, you're not gonna mistake that guy's voice for anyone else either, even when he's basically just a background texture. But that initial novelty kinda wore out with repeat listens and got a little stale, not to mention the melodies on top get a little repetitive and thin compared to other moments on here. Hair Hatch Pursuit is better, has a much more muted flavor, kind of like the stuff on his last album, and a nice progression as it goes along, but didn't stick out to me in the same way as those earlier moments did. Mosquitoes was another one that initially stuck out to me as a highlight, but I eventually kind of lost interest in it. I do like how it goes through its multiple sections and all the dulcimer-like tones that run through most of it, though it felt a little long-winded in comparison with other moments, and again didn't stand out as much on more recent listens. The next 3 tracks saw the album picking up again though. Unlikely Pair has this really nice laid-back guitar-piano duet running throughout much of it, and it kind of gives it a little bit of a jazzier flavor. The pianos all over this thing are really freaking nice. And Daffodil Wisdom has these awesome string pads that really elevate the whole track's sound, while those yelling voice samples sound like angry cops asking if you've got any guns on you and if you're from the projects. Maybe a little bit of an unintentional tonal clash there, especially intensified by current events. Probably would have been more fitting had those samples been over a more dissonant and creepy instrumental like on the following track, but whatever. That one's still a highlight. Has among the best sounding melodies on here. Anyway, Ookazi is one of the noisier and more experimental moments on here, and a definite grower with repeat listens, rapidly switching from pitched down voices to screeching string pads and crunching and pummeling percussion. Not much melody here, and I wasn't sure if I was into it at first, but at this point I think I can say with more confidence that, yeah, I am into it. Convalescing is kind of a meandering interlude with some plucky synths that are nice, but otherwise feels like an extended outro to the previous track. But finally, we close with Yusuke's Witness, which goes through a few different sections with a kind of watery, moody, guitar-centric first half, and this awesome outro in its last minute and a half or so with all these beautiful pads and violins, really closing out the whole project on an emotionally satisfying note. So yeah, that's Are You Sick of Being Unlucky? On the whole, I think I hold this project on about equal footing with Origami. Maybe a tad lower, I'm not sure. The sound design and melodies, as I said, are great across the board. The pacing also helps make the best tracks stand out more and the worst tracks less bothersome than they might be otherwise. Though Origami was the kind of project that kept growing on me with repeat listens and the kind of thing that I was in the mood to listen to quite a bit even well after I posted my review. And I'm not sure if I would say the same about this one. I've probably listened to this album like 6-7 times at this point. It hasn't really gotten much better or worse with more listens, and I don't feel as strong an urge to come back to it at the end. But I don't know, I guess you could talk to me again near the end of the year. When I reviewed Origami, I don't think I would have anticipated that having a spot on my year-end list. So, I guess we'll see how things fare for this one. As for now though, I think I'm just gonna give this the same score I gave his last project. Different strengths and weaknesses, still not sure if it quite reaches greatness for me, but still definitely a lot of fun to listen to and absolutely worth checking out. I'm overall feeling a 7.7 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts. Leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters. They're awesome people. Though if at this point I think there are more important things right now than donating to my Patreon, so I'll instead link a thing for Black Lives Matter. There's better things to donate to right now, I think. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.